I never expected to fall for my doctor. Not while lying shirtless on an exam table, wrapped in a paper gown, trying not to shiver from the chill of the room, or the way his fingers brushed against my skin. My name is Daniel. I'm 34, married to a man named Ethan for the past 6 years. On paper, we look perfect. 2 decent jobs, a condo in the city, a dog named Milo, and the kind of relationship people admire at brunch. But behind closed doors, we're cold. Cordial. Routine. We sleep in the same bed but haven't touched each other in weeks. Months, really, if I'm being honest. I scheduled the appointment for a tightness in my chest. I told myself it was probably nothing, maybe stress, maybe too much coffee. But part of me thinks I just needed someone to look at me and ask, "How are you?" and actually mean it. That's how I met Dr. Adrian Vale. He walked into the room with a quiet confidence, tall, maybe 38, with just enough stubble to blur the line between polished and raw. He wore a navy button-down under his white coat, sleeves rolled to his forearms. His voice, smooth, low, made the air feel warmer. "Daniel," he said, offering his hand. "I'm Dr. Vale. Thanks for waiting." The moment our palms touched, something shifted. A current. A flicker. He held my gaze just a beat longer than necessary before glancing at the chart. "So, chest pain?" I nodded. "Not constant. Just pressure. Comes and goes." "Any recent stress?" he asked, already knowing the answer. I gave a weak smile. "I'm married. So, yeah." He chuckled. "Touché." He listened to my heart with a stethoscope that was far too cold, pressed against bare skin that felt far too aware. His fingers were careful, professional, but not detached. When he asked me to take a deep breath, his hand rested gently on my shoulder, grounding and electric all at once. "You're tense," he said. I shrugged. "It's been a tense year. We talked about sleep, about work." I gave vague answers. He didn't push. But he looked at me like he could see everything I was trying to hide. "You should come back in a week," he said. "Just to be sure." I agreed, though I wasn't sure why. He printed a follow-up slip and handed it to me, our fingers grazing again. It could have been nothing. But it wasn't. That night, I lay in bed beside Ethan. He was turned toward the wall, scrolling his phone. I stared at the ceiling. "I had my appointment today," I said softly. He replied. "No, how did it go?" "No, are you okay?" I didn't press. I was used to the silence by now. Used to going to bed wanting to be touched and waking up with more questions than answers. But something had shifted in me, and it started with Dr. Adrian Vale. I remembered the way he said my name. The calm curiosity behind his questions. The way I felt seen. Not just glanced at, but seen. When was the last time Ethan looked at me like that? In the morning, I made coffee and left early for work. Ethan didn't notice. He kissed me on the cheek out of habit, not affection. All day, I replayed the appointment. His hands, his voice, the warmth in his eyes. I told myself it was a harmless crush, a fantasy born from neglect. We all get them, right? But fantasies don't linger like that. They don't burn behind your eyes when you're brushing your teeth, or make your skin remember the exact pressure of a stranger's fingers. The next evening, I looked up his clinic's website. No reason. Just curiosity. I clicked on his photo, formal, composed, a slight smirk at the corner of his lip. I stared at it too long. I closed the browser and opened a new tab to search something else, anything else. But I couldn't focus. Not on emails. Not on dinner. Not on Ethan asking what I wanted to do this weekend. "I don't know," I said. "Whatever you want." He shrugged. "We could stay in. Order Thai." "Sure." We sat on opposite ends of the couch. The dog was the only thing between us. I looked at Ethan. At the man I used to crave, used to chase. His eyes were on the TV, empty of fire. I looked away, and there he was again. Adrian, vivid in my mind. His hands. His voice. That impossible warmth. I didn't touch my food. Something was beginning. And I didn't want to admit it, but I already knew. A week passed, and I went back to see Dr. Vale. I told myself it was just for the follow-up. Nothing more. Nothing reckless. But I knew I had dressed differently, subtly. A fitted shirt instead of the baggy one. A hint of cologne I hadn't worn in months. I even checked my reflection in the car mirror twice. When I stepped into the exam room, he was already there, typing notes into a tablet. He looked up and smiled. "Daniel," he said, his voice like warm water. "Glad to see you again." "Glad to be back," I replied. And I meant it more than I should have. He gestured to the seat, and I sat down, trying to act casual, normal. Trying not to stare at the way his sleeves were rolled again, veins visible beneath lightly tanned skin. "No more chest pain?" he asked. "Not really," I said. "Maybe once or twice." He nodded. "Stress will do that. Your vitals are great, by the way." Then he leaned forward a little. "Still dealing with the stress?" I hesitated. "Yeah. It's not going away." "Work. Marriage," I said before I could stop myself. His gaze lingered, thoughtful. "Want to talk about it?" I should have said no. He was my doctor, not my therapist. But something about the way he asked, without judgment, without expectation, broke me open. I talked. Not everything, not the worst of it. But enough. How Ethan and I barely spoke unless we had to. How sex had become a memory, not a habit. How I sometimes felt invisible in my own home. He listened. Really listened. No clock watching. No interruptions. Just presence. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "That sounds lonely." "It is," I admitted, quieter than I meant to. He was silent for a moment, and then he said, "You deserve to be seen. Everyone does." And just like that, the breath caught in my throat. It was stupid. Dramatic. But no one had said that to me in a long time, maybe ever. Ethan used to, in his own way. But that had vanished years ago, somewhere between routines and compromises. "I try to hold it together," I said. "Keep the peace." Adrian smiled gently. "Sometimes peace is just silence wearing a mask." The words hit hard. I nodded, unsure what else to say. He cleared his throat, breaking the tension. "Well, medically speaking, you're good. But, emotionally, you might want to talk to someone." "I think I just did," I said. He smiled again. "You're welcome to come back. Any time." I walked out of that clinic lighter and heavier at the same time. At home, everything looked the same. Ethan was in the kitchen, microwaving leftovers. He didn't look up when I came in. "Hey," I said. "Hey," he replied flatly. "How was the appointment?" "Good. All clear." "Cool." That was it. That was all. We ate in silence. He scrolled his phone. I pretended not to notice. We watched an old show we'd seen a dozen times. Laugh track. Canned joy. That night, he rolled over and slept. I lay awake, thinking about Adrian's voice, his eyes, the way he said you deserve to be seen. I started dreaming about him. Not sex, not at first. Just moments. His fingers brushing mine. A touch to the small of my back. His breath close to my ear. It scared me. But I didn't want it to stop. One morning, I got a text. I stared at the message longer than I should have. I should have deleted it. I should have ignored it. Instead, I replied. He didn't write back. But he didn't need to. The line had already been crossed. And somehow I wanted to run further. The next day, Ethan and I got into a small argument. Something stupid, dirty dishes, I think. He raised his voice. I went quiet. He sighed and walked away, muttering, "You never say what you're feeling." But how could I? When I said things, he didn't listen. When I touched him, he flinched like I was a stranger. The silence between us was no longer empty, it was hostile. That night, I sat on the edge of the bathtub while the water ran, phone in hand, Adrian's message still glowing on the screen. My finger hovered over his name. I didn't call. Not yet. But I thought about it, and I knew it was only a matter of time. It started with a message I shouldn't have sent. "Daniel, are you free for coffee sometime?" Off the record. I stared at it before pressing send. Adrian replied within 2 minutes. Dr. Vale. Tomorrow? After work. Café Allora, 6 p.m. My heart thudded. It wasn't a date, but it wasn't not a date. I didn't tell Ethan. I said I had to stay late at work. He didn't ask questions. At 5:57 p.m. the next day, I walked into Café Allora, my palms sweating, heart hammering. Adrian was already there, seated at a corner table, sleeves rolled up, nursing a cappuccino. When he saw me, his face lit up, genuinely, like he'd been waiting for something he wasn't sure would arrive. Daniel, he said, standing. I was worried you might not come. I almost didn't, I admitted. He tilted his head. But you did. I sat down. The table between us felt both too small and too vast. For the first 10 minutes we pretended this was normal. Talked about music, work, the city. But the air between us buzzed with everything unspoken. Every glance lasted too long. Every smile was a question we weren't ready to answer. Then I said it, too bluntly, too honestly. Do you think about me? Outside the office? He didn't flinch. Didn't pretend. Yes, he said. More than I should. The room felt smaller. The sound of clinking cups and soft jazz blurred into white noise. My throat dried. I think about you too, I said. He nodded slowly. I know. We didn't touch. Not yet. But something passed between us, a quiet understanding, raw and real. The kind of intimacy that precedes anything physical. The kind that leaves no room for denial. He reached across the table, his fingers brushing mine. No one else in the cafe noticed, but to me it felt like the earth had tilted. Come with me, he whispered. Just to talk. No expectations. I followed him. We checked into a hotel 2 blocks away. The woman at the front desk didn't ask questions. Maybe she'd seen this 100 times before, 2 men pretending not to be trembling. Inside the room, silence hung heavy. He turned to me, hands in his pockets, eyes scanning mine. If you want to leave. I don't, I said, and stepped toward him. The first kiss was hesitant, then hungry. Like we'd been waiting lifetimes, starving for touch. His hands found my waist, my jaw, my back. Mine pulled him closer until there was no space left between us. Clothes came off in a flurry. No rush, just need. It wasn't just sex, it was release. His lips on my neck, his breath against my skin, the heat between us. Every second felt stolen and sacred. No words. Just gasp. Touch. Surrender. When it was over, we lay in the dim light, the sheets tangled around us. He reached for my hand and held it gently, like it meant something. But the silence returned. This time not empty, just full of consequence. I've never done this before, I said quietly. I know, he replied. Neither have I. Not like this. I wanted to believe him. An hour later, I left. I walked home slowly, as if delaying the guilt. The city lights blurred. I could still feel Adrian's breath on my neck, the warmth of his chest against mine. When I opened the door, Ethan was on the couch, watching something mindless. You're late, he said without looking at me. Yeah, I replied. Work ran over. He didn't press. Just nodded. A commercial played. I stood in the doorway, wondering if the scent of another man clung to my skin. Later in bed, I faced the wall, my back to Ethan. The bed felt like a stranger's. My body ached in unfamiliar ways, some from passion, most from shame. But the worst part? I didn't regret it. I regretted lying. I regretted sneaking. But not him, not Adrian. With Adrian, I felt awake, desired, held. With Ethan, I felt responsible. I closed my eyes and for a moment I wasn't in my bed, I was in that hotel room, breathless, alive, unburdened. My phone buzzed beside me. Adrian. I keep replaying it in my head. You. I didn't answer. But I didn't delete it either. The next morning, the guilt hit me like a migraine, slow and pulsing at first, then sharp behind the eyes. Ethan stood in the kitchen, pouring cereal. He looked at me like he always did, distant, unbothered, locked in his own orbit. But I was different now. My skin still hummed with memory. My lips still tasted like Adrian. I sat across from him, the silence between us unbearable. "I need to talk to you," I said, my voice dry. He didn't look up. "About what?" "About us." He sighed, finally lifting his gaze. "Here we go." I cheated. The word landed like glass, shattering on tile. He froze mid-bite. His eyes narrowed, slowly, calculating. "With who?" he asked, barely a whisper. "My doctor," I said. "Adrian." The room turned cold. "You're joking," he said, but his voice cracked. I shook my head. "It was one time. It wasn't planned. But it happened." Ethan stood, cereal forgotten. He paced once, then stopped. "You fucked your doctor?" His voice rose now, filled with something between disbelief and rage. "Yes." He stared at me for a long, hard second. "Why?" I didn't flinch. "Because I was lonely. Because we haven't touched each other in months. Because I needed to feel something, and he looked at me like I mattered." "And I don't," he snapped. "No," I said, then corrected myself. "Not anymore. And I don't think I matter to you either." That was the wound beneath everything. That truth. That admission. We both stood in silence, two men in the ruins of a marriage they'd stopped watering years ago. He sat down, elbows on the table, hands in his hair. "Is it love?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "But it's something. Something I didn't realize I was starving for until I had it." He exhaled hard, like it knocked the wind from him. "How long has it been broken between us?" "A while." He nodded, numb. "Yeah. I guess I knew." Neither of us cried. Not then. Maybe because the grief had already happened, slowly, over the past few years, in every silence, every untouched night, every conversation filled with nothing. "I want to move out," I said. "For a while. Figure out what I need." Ethan didn't argue. He just said, "Okay." I packed a bag that night. Milo followed me to the door, tail low, confused. Ethan didn't try to stop me. He didn't ask me to stay. And maybe that hurt most of all. I texted Adrian from the car. "Daniel," I told him. He replied a minute later. "Adrian, are you okay?" "Daniel, I'm raw. But honest. For the first time in a long time." "Adrian, come over." I didn't go. Not that night. Instead, I drove. Just drove. Past the skyline, the river, the parks where Ethan and I once laughed. Past the ghosts of who we used to be. Eventually, I checked into a hotel. Not the one Adrian and I had used. Somewhere new, neutral. I needed time. Space. I wasn't ready to fall into someone else's arms as an escape. I didn't want this story to be about running from one man to another. I wanted it to be about choosing myself. Adrian texted again the next day. "Adrian, still thinking about you. No pressure. Just here." He was patient, present, but not possessive. And somehow that made me want him more. Over the next week, we met for walks, coffee, small conversations that meant everything. He didn't push for sex, for answers, for labels. He just showed up. One afternoon, as we sat on a park bench watching the sun dip low, he said, "You don't owe me anything, Daniel. Not love. Not a decision. I just want you to be whole." I turned to him. "But I want you. I'm just scared I'll mess it up. Like I did before." He reached over and touched my hand. "You didn't mess up. You woke up. That's different." I exhaled. That night, I didn't sleep with him. But I slept beside him. And it was the first time in months I didn't feel alone. Maybe this wasn't the clean ending people like. It didn't fit neatly in a box labeled happy or tragic. But it was real. And sometimes that's enough.